In the sweltering marketplace of ancient Athens, the air was thick with heat and the bustling cacophony of voices. Traders, both Greek and foreign, surrounded the enslaved people who found themselves in this bewildering place. Exhausted and disoriented, they struggled to comprehend the unfamiliar language spoken all around them. Amidst the chaotic scene, the watchful eyes of the vendors scanned the crowd, their attention particularly drawn to the youngest males present. In ancient Greece, it was a norm for men to form relationships with boys, and this aspect of life was deeply ingrained in their society. An older man was believed to possess wisdom and knowledge that he could impart to a younger boy, whom he courted with appropriate intentions. However, for the young boys standing at the slave market, this societal dynamic held a much darker potential. Unbeknownst to them, their entire lives could be forever altered if the wealthiest individuals set their sights on them. In a cruel twist of fate, their lowly status as slaves could transform into becoming prized possessions of the affluent class. Welcome to Time Capsule, where today we delve into the secrets of concubinage in ancient Greece, a dark and poorly guarded secret that shaped the lives of these unfortunate young boys. Male concubines across time. The first documented accounts of male concubines can be traced back to ancient Greece and Rome. These intimate relationships between adult men and pubescent boys were commonly known as catamites, derived from the Latin term catamitos. In antiquity, previous cultures would bring young boys into their households to serve as sexual partners for the head of the house and other men residing there. However, these catamites were not solely confined to their roles as sexual companions. They could also be utilized as household servants or entertainers. While such practices are utterly appalling by today's standards, it is important to recognize that in earlier times, societal attitudes held no shame in engaging in such arrangements. In a world with limited social or legal consequences, the keeping of male concubines was an accepted part of ancient society. While they were most commonly found in the palaces of rulers and the opulent homes of the wealthiest merchants, commoners who possessed the means could also own them. Ancient texts shed light on the existence of male concubines and the prevailing social attitudes surrounding them. Although the practice was normalized and intertwined throughout mythology, one need not look further than the infamous tale of Zeus's abduction of Ganymede, the beautiful Trojan youth, to witness its prevalence. However, it is crucial to note that there was a stigma attached to these relationships. The term pior delicatus was a colloquialism in Latin used to describe a delicate boy who served as a concubine, but it could also be employed as an insult when directed towards an adult male. Catamites served as a social term for individuals in such arrangements, but also carried a derogatory connotation when applied to anyone beyond that context. Muddy politics of ancient Greece. In the ancient cities of Greece, male brothels were an undeniable part of daily life. These establishments lined the city streets, featuring individual cabins designed for the explicit purpose of providing sexual services. Male clients, regardless of gender, would frequent these brothels. Remarkably, the sex workers of ancient Greece were subject to taxation on their earnings. However, despite the normalcy surrounding relationships with pubescent individuals, engaging in prostitution of this nature was considered a serious offense. It could even lead to a death sentence. An indictment for prostitution aimed to socially ostracize the individual, stripping them of their civic rights. It was a harsh measure intended to stigmatize and isolate those involved in such activities. Yet, distinguishing between consensual relationships and mercenary arrangements could be a murky endeavor. In ancient Greece, it was customary for older partners to bestow gifts upon their younger male lovers, blurring the lines of what constituted a genuine emotional connection. Therefore, a desired young boy, sought after by many admirers, had to be cautious about who was observing their interactions. A tainted reputation could quickly extinguish any prospects for a future role in public life. While young boys engaged in prostitution may be active participants in the act, their reputation and standing within the nearby public perception were of utmost importance, prone to damage if associated with such activities. If you are enjoying the content so far, then consider liking the video and subscribing. Male concubines of ancient Greece. During ancient times, having concubines was considered a normal practice in Greek society. It was a symbol of status and dominance, reflecting the power and influence of the individuals who possessed them. In these relationships, love and compassion were not the primary concerns. Instead, what mattered most was assuming the role of the dominant figure and never the submissive one. Thus, it was not considered shameful for individuals, even if married, to have one or more concubines as long as they maintained their dominance over them. However, societal perceptions were significantly harsher towards men who took on submissive roles in these relationships. As a result, the dynamics of these relationships typically involved an older man and a younger male. This is where the term Pedaresti comes into play. While many scholars disapproved of this idea, Pedaresti referred to the practice of older men mentoring young boys in exchange for sexual favors. Though customs and views varied across different cities, this approach was widely used throughout the nation. The young boys involved in these relationships were referred to as catamites, who were essentially kept for engaging in homosexual activities. The prevalence of such relationships was so widespread that Plato even claimed that Socrates himself enjoyed the company of young masculine lovers during his intellectual conversations. However, social perceptions of these relationships differed greatly from one place to another. Some societies, like Sparta, openly encouraged relationships between boys and men and even institutionalized them. On the other hand, it was not socially accepted in Athens, where authorities passed legislation in an attempt to eradicate what was seen as an old-fashioned and unnatural tradition. Specifically in Athens, an adult male was not allowed to willfully penetrate another male. However, there were loopholes to this law, as it was generally accepted for a man to penetrate a boy. Catamites also served other roles in nearby households, such as entertainers or sexual partners for other men within the family. While such practices would undoubtedly be condemned by modern society, they were surprisingly accepted during ancient times. The acceptance of concubines also stemmed from the fact that it was seen as a matter of wealth and status. Influential individuals would keep concubines within the confines of their palaces, allowing them to indulge in their desires whenever they pleased. Despite the acceptance of male concubines in ancient Greece, a stigma still surrounded the practice. Male concubines often experienced abuse, as the elites were given leniency in their actions toward those of lower status. Freeborn men were protected from infamia and prosecution in cases of rape or forced passive intercourse under lex cantinia. However, raping another freeborn individual was considered a grave offense punishable by death. To protect boys, they would wear a toga protector as a symbol of their inviolable status, intended to deter unwanted attention and prevent the rape of young individuals. Furthermore, men of higher social status were allowed to use their slaves as sexual objects, regardless of their age or circumstances of birth. This was mainly because slaves lacked civic protection or power, and their bodies were deemed to be utilized solely for satisfying the sexual desires of their dominus or dominant. To describe this, the term pure delicatus came into play. It was often applied to a child slave who was specifically used for bodily pleasure. An infamous piece called the Warren Cut depicted intimate scenes of two males, showcasing the image of a pure delicatus. In more extreme cases, a pure delicatus might be castrated and dressed in female clothing in an odd and depraved attempt to maintain their feminine appearance and passive beauty, as well as to prolong their youthful traits. As societal attitudes shifted, legislation was introduced to forbid the castration of a slave against their will for the sake of profit. This was in response to the growing trade of slaves for sexual enjoyment, particularly the trade involving eunuchs and pure delicati during the early empire. Thanks for watching the video, and if you found it informative, please like and subscribe to Time Capsule for similar content. We look forward to sharing more knowledge with you in the future. Until then, take care.